Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Dr. Doctor, the show where no topic is too hot or too cold. Whether it's politics, religion, relationships, entertainment, or everyday life, you will be hearing from the experts. This show is not for the faint of heart or the faint of mind. But if you want to be inspired, you have come to the right place. And now, prepare to be enlightened as we introduce the host of Dr. Doctor, Dr. Peter Tassi, and his close advisor, Dr. Fooch.
Welcome once again to Dr. Doctor, and thanks for joining us today. It's a great pleasure and honor to have Junior back on with us to discuss the great accomplishments of Trump and the loony left. We got a question, Junior, from one of our viewers, and I'm going to read it to you if you can respond to this. Question for Junior. I was a social worker all my life and have many friends that are die-hard liberals or NDP followers. For those of you listening in the States, that's the new Democratic Party that is far left. They don't like Trump. It's not about what he has or has not accomplished, but about how he presents himself. When I tell them about his accomplishments, they say, those accomplishments are Obama's. He started those programs. Junior, I find your comments on Trump's accomplishments, the data, the stats, very interesting. What are your thoughts on their response?
Like, how do you even respond to that? I mean, it's so crazy, it's so insane. Trump's done the exact opposite of what Obama did, especially with the tax cuts and the different deregulation of different. I mean, there's no answer for it. It's complete. It's a definition of insanity.
It is
for someone to even suggest that.
Yeah.
Absolutely ridiculous. How do you even respond to it? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Trump gets in, he deregulates, he cuts taxes, he implements many, many programs, we can't even list them all today, to stimulate the economy. The economy explodes, but Obama did it all.
Well, this is it.
The guy that said you cannot even bring back manufacturing jobs. Meanwhile, 12,000 new factories have opened up in the States compared to the 60,000 that closed during the Obama years. And they say, Obama says you can't, you need a magic wand. Well, Trump did, but it's still Obama that did it. It's staggering.
It really is. It's basically common sense. I mean, obviously, if you want to stimulate the economy, you have to give businesses the incentive to open up and operate in your country.
Exactly.
If you're going to have regulations after regulations after regulations, which is exactly what the Democrats and left always do, who in their right mind is going to want to start a business knowing what they're going to have to go through just to get it started? I mean, even without the regulations, what it takes to, you know what I mean, to start something, a major business, is just, it's mind-boggling. Now, on top of that, with all these regulations, I mean, they were talking like it takes 10 years just to get the okay to go ahead to build a bridge, stuff like this, infrastructure stuff. I mean,
yes,
it's mind-boggling. Not even counting the taxes, just if you count the regulations. Who in their right mind would want to go ahead and go through all that?
exactly.
So he's made it. He's deregulated stuff that, you know, I mean, not critical stuff where you're gonna put the people's lives in danger. Just ridiculous stuff.
Yes.
A lot of these environmental assessments and stuff like this, you know, they're worried about a certain bird or a salamander or something being affected that is so ridiculous that they hold up, you know, major projects. And I mean, I don't even know how to respond to somebody who says that.
It's very difficult to respond. We see here in our own small city here where the regulations and the permits and what you got to go through to put a bedroom in a unit. It's thousands and thousands for architectures and permits and this and that cripples an economy. That prevents business people from expanding and doing what they want to do.
Yeah, it amazes me, like the two class of people. You got the doers and then the, whatever you want to call them, takers. And it amazes me sometime, like in this city, with all the regulation and nonsense you have to go through, it amazes me that we have anything.
Exactly.
It seems like the doers will always overcome.
Yes.
But, of course, if you make it easier and sensible and everything, you will get more doers, you'll get more jobs, you'll increase.
Absolutely.
It's just such common sense. But, of course, we know the left,
Yeah, that's why in our city we go down 3 major throughways, 3 major streets, and 80% of the businesses are boarded up buildings that investors are hoping to sell as the prices continue to. But nobody wants to do anything because it's impossible to do anything, and we saw that with the Obama years, where the millions more on food stamps, millions more on welfare. I saw the one of the co-founders of Home Depot interviewed, and he says, look, it's very simple. With the liberals, they want to get back in. If they do, they're going to raise the corporate tax back up to 28%. Trump dropped it down to, what is it now?
21, I think.
21%, which is on par with some other countries in the world. And there's other countries where their corporate tax rate is higher, but for the most part, countries try to keep it low. At one time, the States had the highest corporate tax rate in the world. Now it has on par with the lowest, and the economy booms. So he says, look, it's a very simple formula. Yes, I'm a wealthy man. I have a lot of money. But if you're going to create thousands of regulations and you are going to increase the corporate tax rate, you cripple us from doing. We don't want to invest in this country. We don't want to create more businesses. And he says, he was kind of apologizing for being wealthy. That's how guilty these people make people feel. And but he says that's the reality of it. Money goes offshore. Businesses go offshore to other countries. If you want to tax them to death, you cripple the economy.
Well, you could take a look at if you take a look at places like Singapore or Ireland or Hong Kong, they have very low. Ireland is only 12.5% the corporate. So then they became the Celtic Tiger, obviously, because of, for reasons like that. The thing is, let's face it, human nature. People are not going to open businesses where they're regulated and taxed to death, no matter how much they're worth.
Exactly.
Even Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, these guys, $100 billion. It doesn't matter.
No.
Nobody wants to lose.
Right.
And
they don't want to deal with the hassle.
And you might think it's morally. See, as far as I'm concerned, they should. These very wealthy people should give back, and a lot of them do. Certain things like the Giving Pledge, where they're going to give half of their wealth. Things like that are great, but that's philanthropy. That's not business.
Right.
Okay, and you can't regulate morality when it comes to that. So
yes.
Hopefully these people give back. More and more are now. I know there's, of course, greed is, let's face it. But you can't, raising the corporate tax rate, who in their right mind would think that's going to create jobs?
Exactly.
If I said to you, would you rather pay 12.5%?
Right.
Or would you rather pay 38%?
Right.
I mean,
it's obvious.
You know what I'm saying?
It's so obvious what it does, how it cripples the economy.
Well, why would the company stay in the country?
Exactly.
Because of globalism now, it's a one open free market, the whole world. So they could go to another country, pay way less in wages,
yes.
pay less in corporate tax, sell back to the country that they left.
Yes.
And this is what Trump has done, is tried to prevent that by, telling companies like Ford, if they move their plants to Mexico, he will put a 25% tariff on every car that comes back into the U.S.
Yes.
So, I mean, it's just simple common sense, which
simple
of course
common
these
sense,
people
which
don't have.
they don't have it. it baffles my mind every time I hear these people speak. You know, you look at Trump's accomplishments. I just want to mention a few. I posted on our Facebook page, Canadians for Trump, some of his accomplishments. I think I listed about 40 of them that are pretty outstanding. But you look at the jobs, the unemployment rate that has dropped dramatically, the job boom, the creation of millions of new jobs, the vocational education he's doing now and funding that to get more people into the trades, the lowest unemployment amongst all the groups, including women, all minorities, his confronting China, and finally somebody standing up to that corrupt communist country, his trade deals with his allies, and like the USMCA deal, his work on the border wall, by the way, the Democrats were in favor of for decades, but never had the balls to build the damn thing. They just voted that they wanted to build a border wall. His energy independence, forcing NATO to pay their bill, and he's acquired tens of billions off of them. The Space Force, manufacturing boom, what he's done for veterans and what he's done for African Americans in terms of opportunity zones, justice reform, second chance bill. So all these great accomplishments, and yet I thought it was going to end. You know, after the Mueller report was a complete disaster for the Liberals, then we end up with this impeachment hoax with the Ukraine. I thought finally it would end, but no. They still double down 24 hours a day on every network, every celebrity, every late night host, knocking Trump and his policies. Can you explain this?
I mean, it's hard to believe. You know, when he got elected, he said that he was going to fix the inner cities, and somebody says, well, how are you going to do that? He said, by giving them jobs. Well, like you say, the lowest unemployment rate ever amongst African Americans, Hispanics, Asian, Native Americans. Women, almost the lowest. Incredible. I never would have believed all the stuff that he's done.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Just the things you mentioned. Yeah. And there's other things. Less people on food stamps now, obviously, because they're working now.
Right.
More. The poverty rates are the lowest they've ever been.
Yes.
In the minority community, the lowest they've ever been.
Exactly.
I mean, and this is why he has a 30% approval rate amongst African Americans. And if that continues, if this economy stays good and that continues, that's check and mate. Because the Democratic Party,
they're finished.
Strictly they get usually 90% of the African American vote, and he will wipe up in the Electoral College. Maybe not the popular vote, but if he gets that 30%, it's over.
Right.
So it's hard to believe how they just bypass all these accomplishments and will bring something stupid up like what he did on Twitter. Or I mean, we all, let's face it, we all make mistakes. Yeah. We all say things we regret. Trump, I mean, he really doesn't have a governor on him like all these other politicians, which people like. Yeah. He's not the typical politician.
No.
And we've heard, and you know, people in the media talk for years, well, you know, this typical politician we don't want. Well, now you got a guy who's not the typical politician. You got a guy who's fixing the borders, because you've been talking about that for 30 years.
Yeah.
CNN and all these other outlets. You got a guy who's brought the jobs back, the manufacturing jobs that were gone. You kept talking about that and the factories that closed up. He's bringing them back. You've got somebody finally sticking up to China, who we know for years have been devaluing their currency, dumping in middle countries to avoid tariffs. I mean, breaking every rule in the book.
Yeah.
You finally have somebody sticking up with them on trade and other issues. And you finally have somebody talking about let's end these stupid wars.
Yes.
Which have been going on now for... Well, since 9/11, actually even before that. You know, how many...
Well, Afghanistan is 18 years.
Well, look at the United States since World War II.
Yeah.
How many years... I mean, Vietnam, they were in there for, you know, years, decades.
Yes.
Korea before that.
Yes.
Then they get involved in, Yugoslavia, the Yugoslav campaign, the Iraq, and then the Afghanistan. I mean, and then they wanted him to go into Syria. When is it going to end? Like he says, you know what I mean? You want wars forever?
Yeah.
So he's trying to do that. And what do they do when he pulls them out of Syria? They do a Harry Canary on him.
Yeah, they almost had a nit fit.
It doesn't matter what he does. They'll just pick the opposite view and claim that, you know what I'm saying? Even if they're for what he does, of course, they don't want to admit it. They've never given him credit for one thing.
No.
Not one of these accomplishments you talked about have I ever heard the media, other than Fox and, Breitbart.
Yes.
But the liberal media, the 95% of the media, not one compliment.
Yeah.
It's just nothing but impeach.
And when the media goes to that extreme, where you have a president, I think one of the greatest ever, and he will go down in history as one of the greatest ever, have this many accomplishments working against the machine, working against people in his own party, and every time he does something, it's doom and gloom, and it turns out that he was right. There is no third world war. There is no collapse of the economy. So Trump consistently proves that his decisions are right and it's good for the people. And in spite of this 24-hour barraging of destroying him, his family, his friends, throwing people in jail that are associated with him and all the rest of it, he continues to win. And what baffles me on a microcosm, on a small scale, the individual, what goes on in the mind of a human that they can continue to hate someone who's doing everything they always dreamed the leader could do? What is it? Any ideas?
Well, it's hard to say. Like you say, how do you measure a leader? Well, you measure him by the accomplishments, the state of the economy. And tell me one bad indicator. Like you say, the GDP, the growth is up. It's up to over 2.5%. The unemployment is the lowest, in many cases, the lowest it's ever been in certain demographics. Mm-hmm. The economy, the confidence, consumer economy is at an all-time high. The number of people that have jobs, I mean, even the unemployment rate went up from 3.5 to 3.6, even though they created 225,000 jobs. That's because more people are positive looking for work now. We've never had this before.
Right.
So you look at every indicator. The poverty rates are down. You can go online and just Google this stuff.
Yeah.
The amount of people on food stamps are down. Like you say, no major wars. A classic example of how these liberals are in media is North Korea. At first, he was calling the North Korean Rocket Man and all these different things, and the media went crazy. He's going to cause a world war, blah, blah, blah. Then he befriended the guy, and and the media said, how dare he? How dare. This is what you're dealing with. This is the type of insanity.
It's insanity. It's insanity.
And the mainstream media, we used to look to them for. They were supposed to be like the watchdogs, look to protect us for truth. To get to the bottom.
Yes.
All as they are an arm of the Democratic Party.
And they have been for 40 years.
They have been for 40 years.
Even in Canada here, the media is an arm of the Liberal Party.
Exactly.
But now it's gotten so bad. It's so bad that you're just dumbfounded every day. And the hatred, the more success, and the more the media bash him, the more insane they get. Like when I see people like Cooper and Como and all these guys on Blitzer and their reaction to Trump, it's getting more and more crazy. So, Joy Behar, she's pulling her hair out of her head now. Bill Maher, these people, Trump is actually driving them insane. But this is what hate does to people. If you have hate in your heart and you can't see truth, you can't see clearly what someone's doing, whether you like them or not. We've all worked for bosses we don't like, but we think they're great bosses. Or we've worked for bosses we don't like, but we think they're wonderful people. And vice versa. Like, you got to be open to the truth. These people become, not only are they closed to the truth, they're becoming more and more closed to the point where they're going insane.
Well, the media is supposed to be unbiased, and the public always look to the media for the truth. And of course, now the media rates, I think it's 8% they got support of the public actually believe him. They've so destroyed themselves since
Yes.
Trump. I mean, it was bad before he came on. I think they were about 25%. But he has so destroyed the media now, and the concept that they're unbiased. And I mean, we saw it with Reagan and other Republicans where the media were against them, but nowhere near to this extent.
No.
It's so obvious now. And this is why the support for them has totally collapsed. Nobody listens to him anymore. You know, the days of people like Walter Cronkite and that, they're all gone.
Yeah.
We don't respect them. We have no use for them because we see through them now. They're biased. And so, I mean, they've destroyed themselves. I wouldn't say Trump has destroyed them.
No,
They've destroyed
themselves with their hatred.
Yes.
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 Yeah. Let's turn for a minute to look at what the liberals are offering as a alternative to Trump. So we talked in previous podcasts about the insanity of what they're offering. So you look at the free health care for everyone, including illegals, as soon as they cross the border. Americans can't afford it, but they want free health care for everybody. As soon as you cross that border, step your foot over the line, bang, automatic, full free health care. $150 million, $1 trillion free health care plus the Green New Deal, which shuts down the entire energy, which they've become energy independent, shuts down that entire aspect of the economy, cause a collapse in the economy. And in addition, they want free education for everybody. Everybody goes to school for free, wipe out student debt. And of course, changing all the tax things. Now, when people look at this, don't they go, wait a minute, this doesn't, we talked about this before, there's not that much money in the world to do this, let alone in the States. What is it about people that they can't get it?
Well, it's like even James Carville said. I mean, he's always been an extreme Democrat. Even he has said now that they've become a cult. They've become so far, they've gone so far to the left. I mean, basically, they're unelectable at this point, unless they come up with some, I mean...
But there's tens of millions that are still going to vote for these people, I think.
But unless they come up with somebody, Joe Biden would be okay, except he's got dementia now. I mean, you
yes,
can see it.
It's obvious.
So who other than him is in a far, far left? Gabbard maybe, but they're not going to elect her.
No.
So the main candidates, Warren and Bernie Sanders and these guys, they're so...
Buttigieg.
Steyer, they're so far to the left.
Yes, but is Buttigieg? They're far to the left, but you know, Bernie may win. They may have a socialist leader. Really, he's communist. Like now, he's coming out with, if you make over $1 million, everything over $1 million we keep. So if you make 10 billion, we keep 9,999,000,000. Like, this is how crazy it's getting.
I think unless the economy collapses or there's a major, I can't see anybody actually defeating Trump. And I think in the end, somebody like Bernie Sanders, people know he's too... They might be able to run if a candidate comes in, they get somebody, you know, I mean, even Bloomberg, there's a possibility, he's up in third now, there's a possibility if he gets in, he might be able... if the economy turns and things, I think it's a possibility. Somebody like Bloomberg, not Steyer, but Bloomberg, even if Hillary comes back, somebody more moderate, more sensible, and even guys like Bloomberg are saying now that guys like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren are so far. This is why I think he decided to run. Now, personally, I can't stand the guy, but I mean, if somebody like him got in,
right.
There would be it wouldn't be.
What do you think of Buttigieg?
Well, he's not as far left as the others,
No.
but the problem is people, especially the African American and Hispanic community, will not vote for a homosexual candidate.
No.
Just how they are. So he's not going to get the nominee.
And in addition to that, in his own city, South Bend, he didn't exactly treat the African Americans good. He fired the African American police chief, I think it was, and then the African American fire chief. And, he has a bad reputation of working with minorities.
Yeah, but I don't believe he will be the nominee.
No.
I think in the end they're gonna, and I don't think it'll be Bernie, and it won't be Warren. They're gonna come up with somebody who's at least moderate, because they know they can't possibly win with a full-blown communist like Warren or Bernie.
So you think that what's his name, the billionaire? I got a mental.
Bloomberg
is now been dropped in, and he will take. Oh, you listen to people like great, podcasts, very successful, millions and millions of people listen to him. Joe Rogan. Mm-hmm. Okay, we all know Joe Rogan. So I heard him say on his podcast, you know what? I'm not really in favor of this or that with the liberals or this or that. Some of the policies he likes, but he says, I'm going to vote for Bernie. And the guy says, why are you going to vote for Bernie? He has been saying the same thing for 40 years and he's never changed his mind. Now, here's a guy that's a very successful businessman, very successful podcaster, and he's saying he's going to vote for a guy because he's had the same view for 40 years? What if the view is poison?
Exactly.
Like, what do these people, have they lost all sense of rational thought?
They have no critical thinking skills.
Exactly.
Absolutely zero. If you look at Bernie's program, now there's the other view that he won't, if he does get in, he won't implement them because they're totally impractical, and he's just doing it to sort of get the hard left base of Democratic Party. The problem is the American people, to this day, every survey they've done tend to be more conservative, tend to be more leaning towards the right and left. Somebody like Bernie is going to put off so many people that I don't think he can win in the general election, regardless of what the polls say.
I see.
This is why I think they're going to go with somebody who's more moderate. You know what I mean? Biden, if he didn't have dementia to the point he's gotten up, probably would be the nominee.
Right.
I really think in the end now it's going to be some sort of outsider, you would call him.
Right.
Maybe. Well, Trump was an outsider in the Republican Party.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be somebody like Bloomberg, somebody like that's going to end up getting the nominee, or maybe even Hillary if she comes back. But these far left, Sanders, Warren, these type of people, I just can't see it.
No. Do you think Bloomberg I don't think Hillary could ever stand up to Trump again, but if she came back, she'd get demolished. I mean, that's my opinion, but what do you think? Her or Bloomberg, can they beat Trump?
Well, I think if the economy or something, not with the way things are now.
No.
Because there's nothing. Now, if the economy turns, what do we got? We got about 8.5 months. We'll see what happens. I mean, I remember years ago when the first Bush, George H.W. Bush, after the Gulf War, they said even God would beat him. But then the economy turned in a hurry. Went bad, and Bill Clinton came up, and then Ross Perot took a lot of the Bush's votes,
right.
And Clinton ended up winning. So anything can happen. Yeah. You might get an independent running. Personally, I would like to see them snub Bernie Sanders again and then have him run as an independent. That would assure a Trump victory. We know he got screwed the last time.
Right.
He got bought off. They gave him a nice cottage front on Vermont Lake.
He sold his soul for a cottage.
Apparently he already has 2. I guess it wasn't enough.
No.
Maybe they'll give him another one.
Not bad for a communist.
Yes. He's a multi-millionaire.
Yeah.
He's a multi-millionaire like all the liberals, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
And he drives apparently a Mercedes, and he probably uses private jets like Al Gore.
Yes.
But preaches, the climate religion.
Yeah.
It's typical with all these liberals. They're all hypocrites.
Yeah.
At least somebody like Trump, he doesn't tell you not to fly or not to do this or not to do that.
Right.
Doesn't try to run your personal life.
Yeah.
These
or
people,
like Elizabeth Warren hiding behind her aides when she got off the jet and they caught her on camera. She didn't want anybody to see she's, it's hypocrisy to its...
Well, exactly. They don't want you to eat meat now. They want to go... Everything they don't want you to do, they're doing.
Yes.
To an excess that's beyond...
Right.
But this is what it's always been like, these people. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Let's move to talk about, the insanity of it. Have you now this what's called the New Way Forward program? So they've come out with this New Way Forward program. Apparently, there's like led by people like AOC, that nut, and there's like 65 Democrats who signed on to this. They like it. So it ends mandatory detention. Offenses should be does not have any impact on. This is with illegals now. You commit an offense, and it makes no impact on whether you stay in the United States or not. You can't deport them. There's no more deportation. You can't even detain these people. They're let out on bail. Now it's no cash bail, so everybody gets out. We've already seen crimes being committed galore. They're out on bail. The bank robber the other day, and he went out and robbed the bank. One guy killed 3 people, and he was let out. They want to end all prosecution for crossing borders. No deportation for any minority. No local police officer or state officer can work with an ICE agent, even if they're trying to capture a serial killer. You cannot cooperate with each other and work together. And finally, people who have been deported during the Trump years, criminals and killers and rapists and murderers and all these people, we have to fly them back and pay for the flight for them to come back. They figure it'd be over $1 billion. To have a hearing in court whether we should have deported them. And while they're here, they get everything paid for. Now, you talk about insanity.
And this is why these countries are never successful that implement these insane policies. Of course, this is the far left of the Democratic Party you're talking about.
Yeah, but quite a few have signed on.
And if you look at, like I say, these countries like Venezuela now, where you need a wheelbarrow of money to buy a loaf of bread. If you look at North Korea, which has, a GDP of about 1/40th of what South Korea is. If you look at any communist, the old Soviet Union, we know how bad it really was there. And of course, people talk about China. It's not really communist. It's run more as a capitalist country. If you look at these countries, and Cuba, you can see why they're just abject failures. There's no incentive there to bring, like the best and brightest are not going to have anything to do with these countries. If you're not going to pay people, you know what I mean? If you're not going to pay the best and brightest a decent wage, the same as doctors, you know what I mean? They tend to go from Canada to the States because it's the wages are better down there. It's not government run, and there's more incentive, and they have better equipment in hospitals. On top of that, this is basically what you do when you run a state like that. You run it right into the ground. This is what these people would do. I mean, you could take the opposite. You look at Singapore. There's a country that was taken over in the 60s, I believe. Lee Kuan Yew turned it was part of Indonesia, turned a third world swamp into the highest country in every single category you could look.
And how did he do it?
He did it by doing the opposite of what you just described what they want to do. Law and order.
Right.
Only allowing the best and brightest to come in.
Yeah.
Spending tremendous amounts on education, things that matter. Standardized tests, not just education. Making sure the country was #1 in the world in everything. Business tax cuts for corporations and that, as long as they created the jobs in Singapore and, certain pollution controls that they had to abide by. Almost, people called him a fascist. But you know what? Look at the country. Look at the results. How could you go from a third world basket case to the number? You can look online on everything. Singapore leads on just about everything. The top country. Basically, this is what Trump wants. And all these leaders that think the same way. They want nothing but the best. And these other ones are the complete opposite. They want to bring in nothing but the worst.
Right.
And this is why...
Mind-boggling.
This is why, even though I know you're not supposed to say anything good about, people like Hitler and that, but if you look at Germany before the war, Germany was number one in everything because they won't tolerate the nonsense. They won't tolerate people on welfare. They won't tolerate murders. They won't tolerate criminals. They won't tolerate teachers that don't meet the expectation. They won't.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep. And you look at also things like this green light law now, where they're blocking officials from accessing DMV databases so they can't find out if a person who owns a car has a criminal history or there's warrants against them. You have them illegals applying for driver's licenses. They've cut out federal agencies from any investigation of illegals or criminals. They've decriminalized everything. They want to decriminalize the liberals. I'm talking about all drugs, heroin, everything for the users. They tolerate Antifa and groups like that who enact violence. They always talk about the right being violent. The left is so violent. They've had more attacks on people, police officers, attempted assassinations. They want to give all illegals IDs now. So when does it end? Do we have to see the collapse of a country before it ends?
Well, that's what you would have. And the reason why they want to give the licenses to everybody is so they can vote, even though they're not citizens.
Right.
The Democrats, basically, they're just concerned with power. They're full-blown communists. This is what they are. That's what the Democratic Party's become. It's hard to believe because in the United States, even the Democrats in yesteryear, like the Kennedy Democrats and all that, they would be considered very right-wing today.
They would, yes.
Kennedy was a very anti-communist, but now what you got is basically just a bunch of full-blown communists. And I still, name me one communist, name me one successful country that has practiced communism. And don't mention China because it's capitalism.
Right.
The actual economics is capitalism.
Yeah.
It doesn't work wherever it's been practiced.
Never worked. No, even China has massive poverty too still. But what about like Bernie and some of the socialists mention the Netherlands countries or those countries? They're not really socialists though. They say we're not socialists.
They're like you were talking about corporate tax rates. Corporate tax rates are about the same as the US now. The US used to be higher. They're actually not socialist countries. They have good social programs. They have good social, which I agree with.
Yes.
They have things like pensions for the people that,
Right.
Unfortunately, those countries are starting to get like the Democrats, let in a lot of people, refugees, people that aren't going to produce. But in the past, countries like Netherlands, Sweden, Finland, Norway, the Scandinavian countries especially, they've always had generous programs for their own people.
Right.
Not criminals. They've had generous programs for people that actually worked. You see, that demographic, they've never had problems with like high unemployment, this type of thing, because the people all kind of have the same culture, mentality. They're all hardworking. They're not going to go on welfare if they don't need it. They're not going to abuse the system.
Right.
So it comes back to that old saying that you can have open borders or you can have a welfare state, but you can't have both. So if you have a welfare state, you got to have closed borders.
Right.
And you got to have people that basically are all going to work. It's still a capitalist system. They still have very rich people in those countries. It's a capitalist system, but it has very generous programs.
Right.
They spend they spend a lot, and Canada's the same.
Canada's the same.
We're not a socialist country. We're not communist. We're still considered a capitalist country, but that has benefits. So, and it comes back to, like I say, you can have open borders or you can have a welfare state. You can't have both.
Right.
Which is what these lunatics in the left in the U.S. want to do. Open the border up.
Yes.
Let all these people in. These people aren't coming to the United States to look for jobs.
No.
They're coming, and it's the same in Europe. The millions of refugees they're getting now every year are not coming to look for jobs.
No, I've read stats where only 1 in 13, 5 years later, are working.
That's right. And they're not interested in learning language, or they're not like our grandparents who came over and people that came over who wanted to work, learn the language, assimilated, became Canadians and Americans. These people want to come over, bring their religion, in most cases Islam, bring their culture, and practice their culture in a foreign country. I mean, but this is the kind of insanity that's going on in Europe too, because they have a far left there.
Yes.
And it's the same thing.
Yeah, now we talked on one show about how the world is moving more towards nationalism than globalism. Do you think that this trend is going to continue and bring Trump to a victory in 2020 and other countries continue to move in that direction? Or do you think it's going to be, what do you see happening?
It's hard to say, because a lot of these events are what trigger the nationalism and populism. In the case of, Europe and that and everything, a lot of it was the refugee crisis.
Right.
So if things are going good, people tend to be, probably more globalist.
Yes.
When they start having problems, like massive amounts of refugee, increase in crime, therefore taxes have to go up, then they start going towards nationalism or populism. And this happened with Brexit in Britain. Before the refugee crisis, it was 2-1 against Brexit. After the refugee crisis, Brexit won. So it depends on the chain of events things that happen. Like with this coronavirus in China, this has caused this is a nationalist backlash too, because people are more skeptical of this sort of international where people can just get off planes from anywhere. They're now worried about spreading viruses and all these other things. So if events like that take place, it tends to turn the people to more nationalism. If they start buying into the global warming thing and everything, it'll turn them more to globalism, because they want to enact all these green laws and stuff. So it just seems the crisis of the day seems to determine which way these countries go.
And we don't know what the crisis of the day is going to be.
Well, we don't know what's going to happen. There might be, they're talking now because of the war in Syria and everything that the Russians are doing there in Turkey, there might be another 3-4 million people that are going to cross over and come into Europe. So that will drive that will drive nationalism. So basically, it's the leaders that were in, the globalist leaders that were in, that caused it by allowing, in the case of Europe, the refugees, Merkel allowing 2 million refugees to come in within a year, that caused the backlash.
Yes.
So they actually caused their own problems.
Yes, because, well, it's going to be interesting, and we're going to follow this election procedure here, the primaries, and see who the Liberals end up taking, and whether Trump is victorious again in 2020. Everything looks good so far, but like you say, Junior, it all depends on what happens and what day to day. It's a day to day watch.
It could change overnight.
It could
change overnight.
Junior, thanks for being with us today. That was a great talk about the Trump winning, and the left going loony. Thanks for joining us today, and we look forward to joining you again in our next podcast. Have a great day and a great week.